Lone Depot Park, constructed just over a decade ago, boasts a striking and futuristic design that stands out in Major League Baseball. Yet, it's becoming increasingly evident that the Marlins may have been a misstep by staying in Miami, or perhaps even in Florida altogether. The only reason relocation isn't being discussed is its recent opening in 2012. What's truly disheartening is the Marlins' lack of playoff appearances at their home stadium. Poor attendance led them to close off the upper deck of this billion-dollar venue as early as 2017 to 2018, a mere 5 years after its inauguration. Clearly, the local demand for baseball isn't sufficient, making Lone Depot Park an ill-conceived project from the start. Looking forward, I'm intrigued by the Marlins' prospects over the next decade or so. Even with improved performance on the field, I doubt attendance will see a significant rise. The stadium's design as a pitcher's park further complicates matters, aligning with the Marlins' historically weak offense. Aside from Giancarlo Stanton's standout season, offensive rankings have rarely favored the team. In summary, the Marlins' predicament with Lone Depot Park is unfortunate. Despite its impressive aesthetics, this stadium was an oversight. The future trajectory of both the teams and the stadium remains uncertain, but it's clear that tough decisions lie ahead. Originally named the Florida Suncoast Dome, Tropicana Field was constructed in the late 1980s and opened its doors in 1991. Interestingly, it initially hosted NHL games before becoming home to the Tampa Bay Rays about 5 years later. However, the decision-making process behind Tropicana Field's construction timeline seems baffling. While iconic stadiums like Jacobs Field, Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and Coors Field were emerging in the early 1990s, Tropicana Field opted for a fully enclosed dome. While Florida's unpredictable weather played a role, this choice came with numerous drawbacks. The biggest issue was timing. Completed in 91, Tropicana Field didn't see MLB action for several years. It was designed to lure an MLB team, but with cautious budgeting due to the uncertainty of securing a franchise. This hesitancy resulted in a lackluster outcome. Fan support has also been problematic, failing to generate momentum for funding renovations or a new stadium. Even plans for a nearby replacement stadium may face the same hurdles of obsolescence and low baseball demand. Alright, let's break it down. The Rangers faced scorching Texas heat in their old stadium, aptly nicknamed the Frying Pan. So what did they do in the early 90s to solve this? They built another open-air stadium with minimal shade. Enter Rangers Ballpark in Arlington. Now, I'm a big fan of this stadium. It's visually stunning with its brick exterior, and the interior is equally impressive. The old-fashioned grandstand in right field and the center field offices add a unique charm. But here's the catch. Its location became its downfall. Positioned where it was, the ballpark's lifespan was short-lived. The Texas heat became so unbearable that they couldn't even schedule day games there anymore. In the end, this stadium had a glaring flaw. Its brief tenure and the challenges posed by its location make it clear it should never have been built without a roof. So the Rams finally got their NFL team, only to lose it quicker than they gained it. A major culprit? The Edward Jones Dome. Frankly, building a dome in St. Louis, Missouri, where the weather in September and October is typically gorgeous, just doesn't add up. Look at Kansas City's Chiefs. They manage outdoor football just fine despite the cold weather that comes later in the season. The Edward Jones Dome was a colossal blunder, a massive structure with no natural light. Unlike other domes that cleverly incorporate translucent elements for brightness, it felt dismal and outdated, with interior design choices that further added to its confusion and impracticality. Yet, there was little enthusiasm for the football team. especially after the glory days of Kurt Warner and the greatest show on turf came to an end. The Rams lost favor, and much of it was due to this disappointing stadium. In hindsight, an open-air stadium would have been the obvious choice. Just imagine what could have been a proposed replacement: National Car Rental Field, a picturesque traditional venue along the river. Unfortunately, by the time that option was considered, it was too late. The Rams were already on their way to LA. FedEx Field is a prime example of what happens when you build a stadium that's just too big. This was the largest stadium in the NFL, located in the middle of nowhere. Now, with NFL stadiums, you can sometimes get away with remote locations because there are so few games. But the massive capacity and the giant upper deck wrapping all the way around, it just didn't make sense. The renovation was half-hearted, turning it into the worst stadium in the NFL over the past decade. It's a terrible situation. This stadium desperately needed a complete redesign. FedEx Field has been stuck as one of the worst stadiums for years now, and it looks like it will stay that way for at least another 6 or 7 years. The Bears' approach to renovating Soldier Field was truly peculiar. They poured over $1 billion into this project, but instead of building a completely new stadium and incorporating some features from the old one, they decided to build inside the original pillars of Soldier Field. This decision really limited the space and makes you wonder, why invest $1.1 billion in a renovation that confines you to such a restricted area just for the sake of preserving old pillars? The result is a stadium that looks strange, with the old pillars and the new construction awkwardly mashed together. The giant wall of upper deck seating doesn't help either. Now, Soldier Field is considered one of the worst stadiums in the NFL. It's such an odd situation and a lesson in how not to handle stadium renovations. Olympic Stadium, a $3.3 billion debacle when adjusted for inflation, was built in the 1970s as a versatile venue original for the Olympics. Located in Olympic Park, it later became an MLB stadium in 1976, following a similar path to Turner Field. But let me tell you, the decision made with the stadium were perplexing. They installed an innovative cable roof that quickly turned into a disaster. Within just 5 years, the roof malfunctioned, despite the hefty billion-dollar price tag. By 1995, Olympic Stadium was already notorious as one of the worst MLB venues. Its cookie-cutter design and malfunctioning roof made it more like a de facto dome. To make matters worse, they threw nearly another $1 billion into renovating the roof, a staggering amount of money wasted on a flawed project. A prime example of a stadium built at the wrong time. Constructed in the mid-1980s primarily for the NFL, it was also designed with the idea of hosting MLB games if needed. However, by the mid-1980s, the trend was already moving away from multi-purpose stadiums. If Sun Life Stadium had been built in the late 60s or 70s, when cookie-cutter designs were more common, my critique would be different. But its timing was off. You might recall the extensive renovation that transformed it into Hard Rock Stadium. Had they built it just a decade earlier, they might have opted for a new state-of-the-art translucent roof stadium instead. Personally, I find the roof overhang they added looks quite dated. They felt compelled to renovate because the stadium, built in the 1980s, hadn't reached its expected lifespan. Starting fresh wasn't an option, especially in Miami, a city known for hosting major events like Hurricanes games and massive concerts. Looking back, a translucent roof dome stadium might have been a wiser choice. Regardless, Sun Life Stadium stands as a reminder of what happens when you build something just a tad too late. Another prime example of a stadium that missed the mark in terms of design and timing. Built and opened in 2010, it's already feeling outdated. Back then, it raised eyebrows with its fully enclosed upper deck, which was a questionable choice even at that time. I mean, they originally planned for a roof but had funding issues along the way. You'd think with two NFL teams sharing the venue, funding and collaboration would be easier, right? But it's not just about the lack of a retractable roof. It's the whole enclosed design. It feels like they took something bad and just made it slightly less bad. In the next decade, as other teams like the Jaguars, Browns, and Bears undergo renovations, MetLife Stadium is likely to slide down the rankings. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up in the bottom 20 by 2023. They're stuck with it now because it costs a fortune to build, but it's already showing its age. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed this discussion on stadium design and history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Luxury Xplore for more content like this one. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.